Hello, everyone, and welcome now to week 13 of business writing. I hope you all are doing well amidst all these circumstances. We have a lot to go over, actually. Right now, one of the first things I want to say is just to catch up on where we're at in the course. And so let's take a look at the syllabus. Okay, so here is our syllabus. One thing I should mention is that our grade distributions. Someone aptly pointed out how on the last syllabus I uploaded, some of the points were missing. I fixed that, and so everything should be a 100-point distribution. Another thing that was pointed out to me, and I think it's a very good point, is if you look at your grade right now on the weighted total, one thing to be aware of is that although something might have a certain amount of points, that is not necessarily reflective of how much that is worth for your final grade. For instance, your rough drafts are worth 100 points, correct? And also your final drafts are worth 100 points. However, your final drafts for the writings you've been done are worth significantly more than those 100-point rough drafts. So that's just something to be aware of. If you have any questions or concerns about that, feel free to let me know. So right now we are at week 13. The first thing I want you to know is that there are a lot of things that I need to get on in terms of grading your resignation letter, the final draft you made, also chapters 20 and 21 of On Writing Well, and your rough drafts of that, and the discussion board post as well. I will do my best to, the next time, or a week from today, have all those graded for you. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is that a fair portion, I would say most people, got their chapters 20 and 21 uploaded. A few people didn't. That was kind of unusual. I think maybe just given the circumstances, they missed the memo or me communicating that. So given the circumstances, I'm going to extend that for 2 or 3 more days. So if you're one of the people that didn't get that up, please just upload that as soon as possible. Okay, so now we're moving into resumes. One of the first things I want to say is don't pay attention to the specifics on this. I've decided to do something a little bit different with resumes. What I'm going to have us do is this week, I am just going to have you look at 4 different resumes, analyze them, and on the discussion board, evaluate them. So that's all you're doing this week. The next week, what I'm going to have you do is upload your resume. And instead of having peer review, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to specifically look at each one of your resumes, offer you feedback and suggestions of, hey, I think these things should be changed. I think this would be more helpful. And then you'll turn in your final draft. So you're not going to get feedback from your classmates. Instead, you will get direct feedback from me. So to summarize, this is where we're heading for the next few weeks before the course ends. If you did not turn in chapters 20 and 21, get that in. This week, we are going to look at 4 different examples, and you will need to respond on the discussion board. The next week after that, you will need to have your rough draft done. If you want to work on that ahead of time, you're welcome to. And then you'll turn in your final resume after you get some specific feedback from me. Another thing I want to mention is that I want this resume to be helpful for you. So essentially, if you think, hey, I actually would rather do a CV, which is something people do for academics if they're applying to graduate school, you can say, instead of a resume, I want to make a CV. That's fine. Also, maybe you're already happy with the resume you have, and you have a specific job that you're thinking of applying to, and you're wanting a cover letter. I'm fine with that as well. Just let me know, and we'll work with that. So as I just mentioned, for this week, what you will be doing is looking at 4 separate resumes, then responding to a prompt that I have for us on the discussion board. So first, let's look at where everything is located. If you go to course content, sample resumes, here are the 4 resumes that you can look at. You'll download and evaluate each one. Now, if you go to tools and then discussion board, you will find the prompt for the resumes. And so respond to this right here. I'll read it aloud. Considering the specific positions being applied for, evaluate each resume. So what I mean by that is that some of these resumes might be applying for a teaching position. Some might be a position for a bank. With resumes, keep in mind that they change and might be designed differently, and usually they are, in fact, for whatever position is being applied for. So a lot of the success of a resume depends on how it's tailored to the job that is being sought after. Okay, so for each example, explain how well the resume meets the requirements typically thought of for a resume, including contact information, visual layout, organization, active verbs, clear objectives. I will explain those in just a bit. Also, bearing in mind that these resumes are communicating to different audiences, how well is each specifically crafted for the job being sought after? Okay, so be sure to, for this week, that's what you will be doing. So now let's talk a little bit about resumes, and then we're going to look at a few, and I'm going to give you my feedback, my thoughts on kind of how I think these are working and operating. One of the first things to remember about resumes is that they look very different depending upon the field you're in. So I highly recommend, whatever you're studying or any potential job you might be interested in the future, looking at sample resumes already in the field. Either just going on Google, if you're, I don't know, interested in elementary education, resumes, elementary education samples, there'll be a plethora of those. Also, if you know someone who is in the field that you're wanting to go into, for example, I don't know, if you're studying accounting and you know some professional accountants, it's a great idea to say, hey, I'm working on my resume. Would you mind sending me yours just so I can see how you set it up and designed it? It's not cheating to take the way people organize their information and put together their resume and use that as a template. So remember that as you're moving forward. I mean, resumes also, I've been teaching this course for a while, and I've even learned a lot about fields I didn't know and the specifics of resumes. So for example, students I've had that are in computer engineering, their resumes will be very different from most others in that in their resumes, sometimes they'll put hyperlinks to other places to show that they're fluent, in computer literacy. Also, people that are graphic designers tend to have more of a visual flair. They're trying to show off their ability at making things look attractive, right? Whereas other resumes might not need that much visual flair, and it actually might be distracting. So look at samples. If you can, do your best to find those and adjust your resume accordingly. Okay, another question that a lot of people have is, what is the typical length of a resume? The general rule of thumb is to try to have it on one page, which can be tricky because you don't want it to look too cluttered. However, there are a lot of exceptions to this. Generally what happens is that positions that are entry-level positions, one piece of paper, one front side of a piece of paper. And that's because oftentimes when these jobs people are applying for them, they're moving through them quickly, and too much writing might actually not make the best impression because time is money, money is time in the business world, right? There are exceptions for this, however. As people tend to get specialized, it's more acceptable if you are a lawyer or a doctor to have 2, maybe 3 pages so people can really get into the minutia. My field, academia, where being an English teacher working on my PhD now, my CV has 3, 4, I think 4 pages. Some people's have a longer length because they'll include things like publications, conference presentations, courses that were taught with descriptions, all those. But general rule of thumb, 1 page. Another thing to know about resumes is that typically you want to, at the beginning, describe your objective. What are you applying for? Now, this isn't always the case, but I would like you to do that for this one, just so that when I'm evaluating it, I can know the position or the field that you're going into, and that way I can look up, oh, okay, this person's applying in this field. I think this is how they are going to design things. Another question that comes up a lot with resumes is, do I put my GPA on there? Here is the general rule of thumb I have heard on this. If you have a 3.0 or higher, consider putting it on. Certainly put it up there if you have a 3.5 or higher. Something to consider, though, is that for the most part and most jobs, they don't always really care that much, actually. They tend to care more about what your experience is and things like that. So if you're below a 3 point, I would say just don't put it. And usually that's acceptable. There might be some exceptions depending upon what your field is, but that's the general rule of thumb. Another thing to consider about resumes is that usually how people organize it, and it can vary, but is your name, your contact information so that people can reach you, then what you are applying for, so an objective, then it goes into your education, then it will move towards your experience, your skills, those sorts of things. We'll look at some examples. When you are describing the positions you've had in work, the descriptions you want to use, you usually want to have active verbs and a variety of active verbs. So, gosh, of course, now I'm blanking, blanking on active verbs. Managed, served. These aren't very good verbs, but that's okay. We'll look at some better active verbs. For some reason, my brain's kind of blanking on them. But basically not I did this or I worked here. It was assisted, trained, things like that. Yeah, so let's take a look at some resumes right now. Okay, so let's look now at a sample resume. This is legitimately one that I just pulled off the internet as a sample resume. Yeah, you can see the Amanda get a job, right? Very clever. But yeah, visually so far when I'm looking at this, few good things. The name is a bit bigger, which is good. I think it stands out a little bit. Contact information is easily accessible there with both the address, a phone number, an email, and interesting LinkedIn right here. And wow, they actually hyperlinked it so you can hit in there. Yeah, if you have a LinkedIn profile, not a bad idea to put it. I'm not requiring that, of course. You'll first see they have their education, which is a good idea. They have this line separating that. I like that visually. Some people also like to have borders to keep the information in. So there's not an objective, so we don't know exactly what this person is applying for. So that might be something that this person would want to consider. We have education right here, and on the opposite side, we have a visual of the date, so May 2018. That's another thing you want to be sure to do with your resume, is organize things chronologically and have the date visually separate from the information. So right here we have their information, they're showing their GPA, which is good, Dean's List, which was, an interesting thing. Also, oh wow, they studied abroad, could show some good, exposure outside of the States. Professional experience. So, this is interesting because usually right here we see that it's organized, more recent is June to August, them working at this supply chain, which is good, and then they have May to August. You usually want to start with the most recent and then move towards kind of the past. This though right here with present, I would kind of expect to be up here in professional experience, so that's kind of a little odd, but whatever, that's, a little peculiar. Yeah, look at these active verbs here. Increased next day deliveries of deliver referral orders by this much, and they have specific numbers, which is good. Executed, managed, presented, awesome. These are great for active verbs. Collaborated, provided isn't that great of a one, not that great of a verb, but it's not bad. Developed, that's good too, and they have specific numbers. So if you've trained people, giving specific numbers to how you trained or the amount of time it was spent is good too. They're continuing with good things here. Increased revenue by, see, 9% specifics, which is good. Then they have, this is good too. If you are fluent in a different language, be sure to include that. That is an asset in almost any workplace you're going to be at. Here's one thing though. If you do not exaggerate, or if you are fluent, do not exaggerate your fluency in a language. Some people I have heard of before will say, yeah, I'm intermediate Spanish or I'm fluent, and I have actually heard of instances where in interviews people have started speaking in Spanish or the foreign language, and the person's like, oh crap. So if you do speak another language, put it, but if not, just don't. Okay, so I was going to look at another one or maybe two more resumes, but I think you get the point. Also, if I make videos that are longer than 15 minutes, YouTube makes me upload them separately, and I'd rather not do that for both our sakes. So I think you have the idea with resumes. Look at these 4, evaluate them, post on that, and we will talk about it next week. I will also go over those sample resumes with you and kind of gather everyone's feedback. I wish you all well. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to let me know, and take care.